Hey y'all, my name's Krista. Welcome back to my channel. I've got another book chat video today, and today's the day. I've got a top 10 list of my all-time favorite books ever. And I've been working on this for a little while. I was overthinking it. I kept moving things around. I would think of another book, and I'd be like, what about this one? This book, I love this book. This book needs to be on the list. And I just had to find a cut. I had to cut it off. I said, no, you gotta just make it final. Otherwise, you're never gonna make this video. So I thought it would be fun to try to make a top 10 list, and I'm curious to see what you think of the list and if any of these are your favorites. And I did make couple little rules for myself. I said only kind of want one book like per author, otherwise it'd be like it could be a love fest for a certain author, right? And then I also limited to books that I read up through 2020. So anything I read here in 2021 won't be on the list. I feel like I maybe need to sit with those a little bit longer, to deem them a favorite. So if I revisit this list in, say, a year from now or a couple years from now, some of these 2021 books, hey, they may show up on the list. I don't know. But for now, through 2020, and nothing from this year. That makes sense. So I'm just going to get into it. I'm already rambling. And I ranked these 10 to 1. That probably was like the hardest part. Because it's like picking your favorite kid or something, right? Anyway, number 10, American Psycho by Bret, Easton, Ellis. I know exactly where I was when I read this book. The year was 2002. It was the summer. I was in Alaska working, and I read this book while I was in what we call the bag room. Many people are probably familiar with this one, but we've got a character, Patrick Bateman, and he's very successful. This is in New York City. He's on Wall Street. Excuse me. He's very successful. He's making lots of money. He wears all the fancy suits. He listens to all the great music. He returns lots of videotapes. He has really awesome business cards, and he has really friends, co-workers, colleagues that all do the same thing. This takes place in sort of that 80s of that time period in the 80s in New York City, these Wall Street hotshots. However, in the evening times and like on the weekends and things, Patrick Bateman kind of has this other side hobby, as you say, which it could include murder, right? I think a lot of us again are familiar with this story, or at least you've probably seen the movie if you've not read the book. But I love this story. I'm due for a reread on this one. I got this old copy. But what I love about this, it is purely this really character study of Patrick. Like, what is going on with Patrick? What is going on in his head? And for me personally, I come away from this book with such an uneasiness. It's at times it's very, what's the word I'm looking for? It's so about day-to-day things, like how, I go to the store and I pick up this to eat, or whatever, and then it's like he goes and murders someone, right? But I came away from this there's such an uneasy feeling, and for me personally, I question this entire book, right? I don't know. Does Patrick is he really doing all of these things? Or is this all in his mind? I don't know. But it's a great ride along the way, and it's so good. So number 10, American Psycho. Number 9, World War Z by Max Brooks. I have read this a couple of times now. I really enjoy this story. It, like it says here, the sort of subtitle, An Oral History of the Zombie War, and that's exactly what it is. We've had a global zombie outbreak, which has now, for the most part, been taken care of. It's receded, as we say. Most of the zombies have been eliminated. And so we have this sort of interviewer who's going around collecting stories from people all over the world about what was happening in their part of the world. How did they make it through? What was this particular government? How are they handling the situation? Things like that. And like I said, it goes globally, throughout the world to different areas, how they handled the outbreak. And it's just so good. It's it's a series of just interviews, and it just feels very real. I really enjoy it. I've read both this book and I've also listened to it on audiobook, which is fantastic. There's like a bunch of different narrators that narrate different, each of the interviews. Basically, it's got like Alan Alda and I'm not remembering anybody else right now but Alan Alda. But the audiobook is also fantastic, and they're both a great way to consume this story. So if you're into zombies, and this is really kind of a classic now and it's very popular, but I love it. Some things are popular for a reason. It's because they're really fun, and I really enjoy this book. So World War Z, number 9. Okay, number 8. Whoa, I dropped something. My apologies. Gillian Flynn's Sharp Objects. Okay, I read this, I think, back in 2019. Blew me away. I had read Gone Girl, and I thought it was good, right? But I read this one, and I was like, holy shit. This story knocked my socks off. We are following a woman who, she is a journalist. Her name's Camille, excuse me. And she has been tasked to go home to like her hometown in Missouri to investigate the disappearance and murder of some kind of young girls in the area. And her editor's like, you're from there, why don't you go check it out? Camille doesn't live in this area for a reason. She has a very strained relationship with her mother. And so this has this whole trope that I love of going home again. You've left your hometown for a reason, but you're brought back for something. I love that, and it's done perfectly in this story. So she goes home, and she's at one hand she's investigating this story as a journalist to write a story about why what's going on with this, why are these girls why are they going missing, right, what's happening. And she's also like having to like reconnect with her mother, and she has like a much younger like half sister and a stepfather, that kind of thing, and they live in this pretty nice part of town, that kind of thing. And then we delve into these family secrets of why she left home, things that she's personally struggling with, which include alcohol use and self-harm. And then we find something out about her mother, and the twists in the story. Because you think, you get a twist and you're like, oh God, that's right. Oh my God, it was all right there. And then you're like, man, why she do this to me? It's so good. So if you haven't read this one yet, and I'm pretty sure this was her debut story. It's blew me out of the water. I loved it so much. And I actually really enjoyed the HBO series that they did for this. I thought it was absolutely wonderfully done. So read the book, watch the series. It's so good. It's so good. Okay, what do we got? Number 7. This is Into the Wild by John Krakauer. This is a nonfiction story that documents the sort of life story of Christopher McCandless. He was a young man, I want to say he lived in South Carolina. He was a young man from South Carolina who, after graduating college, he took off. He took off to see the country. He wanted to get away, and his big goal was to be able to go into the wilds of Alaska and be able to sort of survive and live on his own, make it on his own. And that was his ultimate goal. He did make it there, and if you're at all familiar with the story, you know that he actually died out there. But why I love this story is it came to me at a point in my life that I needed it, right? I read this in the summer of 2001. I was out of college for a little while myself, and I was lost, and so I left my town and I went to work in Alaska for the summer. And I read this book that summer, and I just connected with everything that was in this book. Some people, let me back up. The Christopher story, he was out several years before he even made it to Alaska, and kind of living nomadically and connecting with different people throughout the country. He did not have money. He burned his money, got rid of everything, his possessions, everything, and he just made his way through the country. So I think what I connect with this story, and again, this is just, I think a lot of this is because it came to me, like I said, at a certain time in my life when I was kind of lost and looking for something, and this kind of helped me, during that time period of my life, and so it will always have a big place, in my heart, and but there's this whole thing about what's expected of us, right? And Christopher McCandless did not want to live by those expectations. He wanted a life of his own, without particularly the expectations of his father and his mother and his family and what you're supposed to do: go to college, get a good job, get married, have babies, right? He wanted something more from his life, and it of course is very sad that his life ended in a very tragic way. He basically starved to death. But at the same time, there's this, part where he lived his life how he wanted, and I kind of have to respect that about this. And so I love this story. And I know some people, we talk to old timers up in Alaska, they think he's an asshole, and some people deserved what he got, and some people think he's inspirational. I don't necessarily think he's inspirational, but again, I respect the choices that he made. And that's it, even though he ended up dying in this bus out in the wilderness of Alaska, you got to give it to him. He lived the life that he wanted, and I love this book. I love this story, and there was a movie made about this as well, which I thought was fantastically done. There's lots of documentaries you can see about his family that were asked questions, and interviews, and if you want to dive deeper into the story, it's worth it. I just love this story. I love this book, so it's on my list. What was that number? Hold on. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Number 6 is a big one. It's The Stand by Stephen King. I read this a couple times in my life as well. Once when I was much younger, and I read it actually just last year again in 2020 in December. So I love this book. I mean, look how tattered and torn it is. I've had this for a long time. A lot of people know what this book is too. It's a popular one. It's popular for a reason, right? It's a Stephen King classic for sure. It's about a super flu that has wiped out, I mean, the vast majority of the people on the continent. And so we follow some of the people that have survived. They're just sort of miraculously immune. They have a natural immunity to this super flu called Captain Trips that's come up. And so we meet these sort of handful of people as they're making their way in this new world, right? They're sort of divided in these two factions. They start sort of seeing the visions and having, connections with one of two people, Randall Flagg and the old lady that I'm drawing a total blank from, Mother Abigail. Woo. Favorite book, huh? You can't remember the characters' names. Anyway, by the end it essentially turns into a good versus evil story, but for me, it's all this good stuff in between. It's getting to know these characters, because there's some great characters in here. Nick is my favorite. I love Nick so much. But I like Stu, and I like Franny. I like Abigail. I like Randall Flagg. It's just no one writes a character, I think, like than Stephen King. He gives you so much information, and you really love these characters, and you want to know what happens to them, even though this book is so big. And yeah, it's just so good. It's just so good. It's Stephen King, one of his best, for sure. The Stand, number 6. Are we breaking the top 5 now? Is that 10, 9, 8, 7, 6? Yeah, number 5. Another kind of chunky one. Neil Gaiman's American Gods. I'm a big Neil Gaiman fan. I've read quite a lot of his books. Not all yet, but I read quite a lot. I think I read this for the first time, actually, back in 2019 also. And man, I loved it. Oh gosh, I loved it so much. How do I explain this one? This is a story, well, much like it says, right? American gods. But what is an American god, right? We discover what that is in here. We start off with this man named Shadow. And he, in the beginning of the story, he's incarcerated, he's in jail. And he is going to be let out soon. He's about to be let out soon, but they let him out a little bit earlier because his wife has actually passed away. And sadly, so they're letting him out early so he can, attend a funeral and put things in order, that kind of sort of thing. And along the way, he meets a fellow, and Mr. Wednesday, who has kind of other plans for dear Shadow. And they just start off, that leads to this, basically this, the crux of the story, his involvement with Mr. Shadow, and how this ultimately leads to a standoff between gods, old and new. We've got the old gods that some of us know, and we got the new gods, these American gods, the gods of television, the gods of excess, that sort of thing, gods of journalism. I forget what they all are. They listed in here sometimes, but so we've got this storm, this showdown at the end, and again, it's just another one where I love the getting there to the end. I loved reading about Shadow, learning about Mr. Wednesday. Anansi sneaks in there. Yeah, it's so good. Gaiman's writing is, to me, I love it. I know not everyone's a Gaiman fan. I get it. Not everybody likes it, but it works for me. And yeah, very descriptive writing. And again, any very good characters in here as well. You definitely feel for our old dear Shadow and want to know what his story and know what he's getting into, what in the world's going on. So this is a hell of a ride. It's part road trip, it's adventure, it's got a lot going on in here, and it's such a fun story, and I love it. So number 5. Number 4, Kindred by Octavia Butler. I love some Octavia Butler. I've not read all of hers yet, so something else may sneak above Kindred one day, who knows. But for right now, it is Kindred, and oh god, this story, y'all. Okay, so we've got Dana. This book is set when it was written, which was in the 1970s, so keep that in mind. But Dana, she's a black woman, she's married, and they're moving into a new apartment, and all of a sudden she disappears. And she ends up transported back through time, during the antebellum South period. So slavery is very much happening and going on at this time. But that first trip back, she ends up saving this little redheaded boy from drowning in this pond. And this starts this saga of Dana continuously being pulled back through time at different parts, different time periods, and there is some connection with that little boy that she saved during that first trip back. And it's, it has that sci-fi elements of science fiction. She's very much out of place, of course, in the antebellum South. She's, when she goes back, she has to sort of play a role, of being an enslaved person, because otherwise she's probably going to get killed. But she knows what she knows now. She's a woman from the future, so she has to play this game almost of trying to, of course, survive when she's back in time. And of course we see all of the effects of slavery, how it is affecting the people when she goes back, all of the other enslaved people that she meets when she goes back in time. Where does this take place? I can't remember. I feel like it's in Maryland somewhere is where she's thrown back to. It's not super important, but Butler here just creates this story of perseverance. Dana really has to become a survivor. She never knows when she's going to get pulled back. And she doesn't always know when she's going to get pushed forward either. And so she's just really just trying to make it through. Just make it through. And will this ever stop? It's so good, you guys. Butler writes like nothing else. She's so good. She's so good. And if you haven't read this one yet, you need to stat. Okay, number 3 is a bit of a cheat, and I don't care because it's my list and my rules. But it's this whole series of the Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. We've got the 5th season, Obelisk Gate, and the Stone Sky. And I say the whole series because, I could pick one, right? But you got to read all 3. You've got to read all 3 to finish out this entire epic story. So what's this about? It's quite complex. It is pretty complex. But when you pick it up with the 5th season, the setting is, I call this a fantasy book. Some people label it a sci-fi. For me, it's fantasy because it's got magic, right? But we've got a world that is unstable. It can be unstable. They have what they call 5th seasons that happen, which are kind of apocalyptic events. Massive volcano eruptions or earthquakes, things like that will just wipe out a lot of humanity that's left surviving, and they're having to rebuild again. So they've had so many seasons over hundreds of years or so, And at the beginning of this book, we're like entering into a new season. So it's not a post-apocalyptic. It's like we are in those early stages of the apocalypse, of this new 5th season that is about to happen. And put this down, it's a bit heavy. And in the 5th season, we are following three kind of main characters, 3 main stories here. We've got an older woman who, let me go back. The magic in this system is done by the Origins. Now the Origins have this magic where they can actually kind of control some of these, earth events, geological events. But their power is also pretty unstable itself and uncontrollable, particularly when they are young, because if they just get angry, they can like cause an earthquake or something, because they don't know how to control it. And so the Origins are actually quite feared in this society, and are very much controlled. And so we follow 3 different people and 3 different, they're all women, girls, and one is a young girl who her family has just found out that she has this power, and they're scared to death, and they send her off immediately, and send her off right away so she can get training, and they're scared of her. They don't want anything to do with her anymore. We have another girl who's a bit older, and she is sort of learning. She's been in the training, and she's now sort of apprenticing with this, like, what they call a 10-ring Origin. It means he's very, very powerful, and she's going to be studying with him to hone her powers, if that makes sense. And then we have an older woman who, in the very beginning of the book, she comes home to find her son has been murdered, and her husband has fled with their daughter. This sets off she's now, this main story is she's trying to find her daughter, right? That's sort of the overall gist of this story, but it in no way encompasses everything that's in this book. I've never read anything like this. Still, it is so inventive, so creative, oftentimes quite brutal. Jemisin doesn't hold anything back. She will kill somebody off. The creativity with the magic system and the other inhabitants of this world. I'll just say that the way this world is created, man, I've never read anything like it, and I haven't. I don't think I ever will. Nothing is like this, and it's stunning. And then you get to this last book, you guys. Oh my God, it's so good. It's so good. It might be my favorite. I don't know. Don't make me pick a favorite of those, because that's not going to happen. So, Broken Earth Trilogy, number 3, top favorite book. All right, at number 2. This is when it was getting hard, right? These top 5 kind of like, oh my gosh. But number 2 is an old fave. It's Invisible Monsters by Chuck Palahniuk. I read this, 20 years ago, or 20 years ago now probably, when I was first getting into Chuck, and I read it several times over the years. I love this book. I love this story. Again, how do we even explain this book? So our main character is a woman who she's a fashion model. She was very attractive, very pretty, and she makes her living being attractive and pretty, right? And she ends up in an accident, a car accident, and becomes quite injured, and she loses the whole bottom part of her jaw. This is now missing, it leaves her, of course, unable to speak. And so she's now no longer beautiful, right? And I don't know how to talk about this book because it's at times zany and bizarre, and but she, she chooses not to like kind of have any reconstructive surgery. She's like, no, I mean, like, I'm kind of fine actually. And so she starts wearing veils, just because she doesn't want to like scare people anymore. And in the midst of her sort of, in the hospital being and things like that, she meets someone named Brandy Alexander. Now Brandy Alexander is a trans woman. She, like it says here on the back, is one operation away from being a real woman. And these two make this connection, this seemingly odd connection, and they become friends, and they go on little trips and go on little adventures. And it's at times, like I said, it's irreverent, it's bizarre, it's funny a lot of the times. These characters are just, like I said, Brandy is just like out. She's just the life of the party. And it's just, I don't think I'm talking this one up very good, but it's so good. And then there's some twists in this one that, I mean, still, even on a reread, just get me every time, I did actually I did buy the remix, but I'm a terrible, terrible human being. I have not actually read this one yet, so I need to do that soon. But yeah, this is my original from 20-something years ago. So Invisible Monsters, I love this book. Of course, we talk about the question of beauty. What does beauty really mean? How important is that in your life? What if your life is based off of being beautiful? What sort of life is that? Is that important? All that kind of stuff. It's all in here too. And I love it so much. So that's number 2, Invisible Monsters, Chuck Palahniuk. All right, number one, you guys. Are you ready? It's The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I feel sort of basic bitch, but I love this book. I read it, I don't even know, 5-6 times now in my lifetime. I love this book, and I will not apologize for it. Of course, it's a lot more popular, or in the sort of pop culture of things now, with the show that that's been out for a few years now, and things like that. But I remember when I first read this, and I was literally just like, aghast with what I just read. It knocked me out. I was just enthralled by this story that I just read. It's so phenomenal. Most people know what this is, of course, but we are following Offred, who is a handmaid in this new society called Gilead. Gilead is a very structured society. It's every person has a role to fill, whether you want to or not, including handmaids. I don't know if that is ever explained, but women, I don't think it is, but the fertility rate has people just aren't having babies much anymore, like hardly any. And so in Gilead, they've decided to kind of round up all the fertile women and make them become handmaids. And the handmaids go to live with the more upper class families, the commanders that are sort of head of this new Gilead society. And once a month, she's basically raped by the commander because they want to. She needs to get pregnant. We got babies to make. It's oftentimes very. It's quiet a lot of the time. We are only hearing Offred's side of the story, so it's a first-person story about, what she's having to do, what her day is like. She sometimes remembers back to the time before, when she worked a job and made her own money, that kind of thing. And connections that she made, her friends that, you know, she don't see, and her daughter that was taken from her, things like that. And it's stunning. It's stunning. I feel like if you are just watched the show and you haven't read this yet, definitely give it a read. If you feel like you know the story, you're like, oh, I know what Handmaid's Tale is about now because of, you know, whatever. It's still worth a read. It's what I would call it a modern classic now, and it's that for a reason, you know, because it's so wonderfully written, and it's so horrific at times. It is often terrifying to think of what's going on here. Yeah. And Atwood just captures it perfectly. So Handmaid's Tale is my top. That's it. This is a long video. I apologize, but if you've made it this far, thank you so much for hanging out. Let me know, are any of these your top? Would they be in your top 10? Do you hate some of these? That's fine too. Or what are some of your favorite books? I would love to know what people consider their favorites. And again, thanks for making it all the way to the end. And I will catch you in the next one. Bye.